It's super satisfying for me to know that we're able to get a story out, that what we're trying to achieve and what we're trying to do. So bringing back that sort of old-fashioned hospitality, being more than just a vehicle for food is something I want to be. Having a bit more to it, having a bit more grunt to it, I think is the satisfying part of what we're achieving, I guess.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. In order to ensure profitability, the modern hospitality world steered towards larger venues with higher turnover and higher cash flow. More bums on seats meant more chances of success. At least that was what the industry thought, but the last year and a half has changed the way many see working hours, trading hours, and restaurant sizes too. It's changing the shape of the industry yet again. Stacey Connor is the chef and co-owner of Humble on Duke in Sunshine Beach, Noosa, Queensland. Stacey, how you going?
Yeah, good, thank you, Anthony.
You've opened the tiniest of venues in the last year and a half. Tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, so we've opened a pretty small venue. We're 14 seats, so super small, and we're really trying to focus on making everything in-house, keeping everything made there, and really putting a bit of love into it. Really focusing on sort of good old-fashioned hospitality and service, and it's just myself and my partner. We just have one or two others on the floor and a kitchen hand in the kitchen. So it's just me in there focusing on cooking and really sort of making sure everything's how I want it to be, which is nice. And I think, really getting back to making everything myself again. For so many years I've sort of for 4 or 5 years, I suppose, I've been standing on the pass and sending food and sort of controlling a kitchen. And now I can sort of get back to the love of it all and making bread and making pasta every day. So, yeah, it's really satisfying.
You've been involved in some pretty incredible larger restaurants in your career, which we'll get to. But what led to the decision to open such a small venue?
I think, I think when you get to sort of 20 years in the industry, there can be a sort of element of frustration in wanting to actually get things right every time and get back to the basics and start making, as I said, bread, pasta ourselves, and things like that. And there's so many times you're sort of so focused on pumping 200 covers out the door that, it's hard to feel that love and satisfaction in the food and the service sometimes. So I think that's what, we had the opportunity to take it. And I think that's really what we wanted to focus on, my partner and I, that element of satisfaction that we get from the love of the industry that we do, and really focus on that.
You didn't grow up in Noosa. You're originally from New Zealand and born in Invercargill. Take us back to your childhood. What role did food play in your childhood?
Looking back on it, I think it was a pretty huge part. I think I was fairly obsessed with food from a pretty young age. I was always sort of watching food cooking shows, always getting mum to tape all the cooking shows. And I used to sort of sit there and watch even the knife infomercials and things like that, which is pretty funny when I think back on it, how obsessed I sort of was. But mum and my nana was a baker. And, I think, always having, there was always a lot of cooking around me, and Dad had his own, we had our own vegetable garden, which is not something you sort of see a lot of nowadays, but, he still has it. And I think, potting peas and picking the carrots out of the garden and growing my own radishes and things like that, that's super nostalgic for me now. But, it was a huge part of it, sitting around the dinner table and or sitting up on the bench and watching mum cook, not necessarily being able to get in there myself, but watching it sort of all happen, I was pretty intensely interested in it, I think.
You weren't always going to be a chef. At the age of 20, you joined the Navy. Tell us about that period of time.
Yeah, so I'd already finished sort of my qualifications as a chef, but I think I was sort of looking for a ticket out of where I was, so to grow. I was in a small town at the time in Invercargill. It's a small place, and I sort of worked around Invercargill and worked at some great restaurants. But there's a sort of period of time where you feel like, God, there's nowhere else I can go, and I knew that I needed to move somewhere else, and I always wanted to be either in the police force or in some kind of military when I was a bit younger, and it was sort of one of the directions I thought I might take. So I decided the Navy and a chef might be a way into that, and a way out of where I was, and a new period, a new sort of evolution and that sort of thing. So yeah, joined the Navy when I was 21, I think, and then I was only in for a fairly short period because I guess I already had a taste of hospitality and what it was. So what I got from the Navy, I think, was, I think the camaraderie and the routine and the discipline that I picked up there. And, once sort of my training was over with that side and the physical aspect of it all, getting through all the Navy part of the training, I was essentially a chef again. And for me, sort of being a chef in the Navy I realised it wasn't going to go, obviously was never going to be a creative element to it, but you never push the way you are sort of in the industry. And I realised I really sort of missed that. So I decided to leave, but to stay in Auckland and to sort of pursue the whole hospitality side of that, because I realised that was sort of my passion, I suppose, and I wanted to continue that.
You made a move to the Cook Islands at a 5-star resort. What was that like compared to cooking in the Navy?
Yeah, look, that was definitely experiences on Asataki and the small sort of fairly secluded island there, and it was an interesting experience. I think I was in my mid-20s, and I think if I had been a bit older, it would have been a more sort of settled experience for me. But, when you're on an island, it's sort of, you get a bit of cabin fever after a while. But, the resort was beautiful. And I think I picked up quite a lot of sort of Pacific influence in my cooking for a little bit there after working over in the islands. It was a beautiful space. Unbelievable.
When you returned from the islands, you got a job with Dave Verhol, which is a famous chef in Australia now, with Embler in Melbourne. What was he like to work with, and what did you take from that period of time? Yeah,
I think I probably only worked a sort of period of about 6 or 8 months with Dave, and it was quite enlightening, I think, for me, because he's very creative, passionate chef, and he's probably one of the most passionate chefs I've probably met. And I think for me at that time, I was sort of in my mid-20s. I was about 25, and I was probably going through a lot of self-discovery in that period working there, and not necessarily how passionate I am about the industry now. I was sort of in a phase of, God, is this the right space for me? Is this the right career for me even, But I think there was a lot of realisation after working with someone like Dave, because you realise you either need to go up or you're not going to be a chef anymore, sort of thing. So I think, after working with him, I realised I needed to do more research. I needed to read the right books, because you're only as good as the books you read, and just become a little bit more obsessed or into it, and just do my research, really, I think, and get more involved in cooking. So after I worked with him, I started doing more competitions up in Auckland, and actually trying to be more creative and pushing myself outside the box I was in, and I think I gained a lot more passion from that. I think that carried with me for a while, and I still think of Dave's food now. You know, it's been a long time, but I still feel that's a sort of influence on me, even though it was that short period of time.
Auckland's food scene was really evolving at that time, and Sean Connolly was making an impact there. You joined him. He's a bit of an enigma and a very celebrated chef in Australia. What was he like to work for?
I think, you know, my time, I started at the grill with Sean Connolly, and you know, I started off as a demi chef, which I'd sort of already been sort of every sort of role. I'd sort of been, you know, a chef de partie. I'd been a head chef. I'd sort of didn't know where I was at, and I started this role at the grill as a demi chef. I'd sort of been in a few places, and I was like, and I always felt like I was quite nurtured, and I was quite very well looked after. At the grill, I ended up staying there, you know, 2 years, and during my time and meeting Sean, he was, you know, I remember one day, it was probably like the first or second time I met Sean, and he took me aside after service, and we had a glass of wine, and he just thanked me, you know, and he said, "Thank you for, you know, the work you're doing. I really appreciate it. I think you're doing a great job," sort of thing, and we want to see you, you know, develop. And I think, you know, for me, he used to come once a month maybe to the grill, you know, from Australia and whatnot. And I think that was the turning point for me. I think, you know, I almost fell over. Like, like it was sort of like someone thanked you, and I felt appreciated, and I felt good at my job again, you know, like not that I didn't feel good at my job, but it was sort of a bit of validation, which I think is sometimes required, you know, and that made me really want to pursue being there and move up and step up and you know, and I think that carried down in the hierarchy with Sean too. It was some great sort of mentors that I had there, and I just felt really looked after and appreciated, and I think that's something I always take with me, you know, throughout my teams is just a simple thank you sometimes is all people need, you know.
You went on to work on different projects with Sean Connolly in Adelaide and in Dubai as well. Tell us about how different it was going to those places and creating restaurants for them.
Yeah, I mean, you know, moving to Adelaide was huge. You know, I sort of never seen that sort of coming, but you know, they needed some chefs over there that knew Sean's food and how his philosophies and how he wanted things to be. And you know, I sort of took that opportunity, and like it's just amazing where things sort of take you. It's sort of those periods in time where you think, God, where would I be now if I hadn't have done that or hadn't have worked there? But like it was an incredible experience, you know. The first couple of days I was in Adelaide, you know, we were doing 600 or 700 covers a day, and you're standing at the grill for sort of 12 hours, you know, just cooking steaks. Like it was a real experience, a real sort of whirlwind spirit experience. And I was there for sort of a couple of years, and then I wanted to sort of do the next thing with Sean, you know, which was huge as well. Like how incredible is it opening up a restaurant at the Dubai Opera House? Like why, you know, it just seemed sort of mental, but yeah, it was pretty surreal actually when I think back on it. Yeah.
What was life like in Dubai for you? Can you take us back? Do you have any memories of some of the challenges of pulling a restaurant together there?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think like I wasn't particularly there when the restaurant was being built, but setting things up, you know, I think everything's a lot more of a challenge in a foreign country, obviously, you know, like language barriers and, you know, the people that you're working with that have different ways of doing things, and there's different standards as well. So I think, you know, everything's a lot harder when the standards are different for people. So, you know, there's the logistics of all that. And I think the living side of things in Dubai was probably the biggest challenge. Just going to the bank and opening a bank account can be like a 2-month process, so it's just, the lifestyle things is always a challenge, and you realise, that you've really got to take your patients to that next level when you're working with certain people. But it's one of those things you put down as another experience in your box, which is incredible. I spent a year over there, and it was a huge learning experience and learning curve.
This episode is proudly supported by Montague, handpicked for you.
The things that we're really looking for in plums, first of all, they've got to be sweet. We're really looking for a full flavour explosion in our plums. Red flesh is critically important to us, higher in antioxidants, so all that good stuff. And then we're also looking at a slightly firmer texture. So there's almost a little crunch. That's the real driver for us.
For more information, go to montague.com.au.
How did you end up in Queensland?
Yeah, so my partner's family lived in Toowoomba. So we were just sort of we both ended up moving back. She moved back a little bit before me and sort of started gearing up for when I was coming back. And then I ended up moving back, and we sort of both decided that we wanted to save, and so we were lucky enough to sort of stay with her parents for a good year and a half, I think it was, and sort of go overseas and spend a fair amount of time overseas and do our research over there, because eventually, obviously, we wanted to open our own place. And we spent a year and a half or so there, and we worked in a beautiful little winery called Rosalie House, and so we were both there working, which was a great experience to work together before we obviously opened our own business together, test it out in someone else's business first. But yeah, and then we ended up after a year and a half there, we were like, well, we sort of want to be by the ocean, which is sort of where we feel our best, and we moved to Noosa, which is where we wanted to be.
What was it like working together for the first time? Were there challenges in that life sort of work balance?
Yeah, I think it's always hard. You always need to make time for yourself, which can be challenging sometimes. But I think for me, probably the nicest thing was to realise how good my partner is at her job. You never sort of realise, my partner had sort of been working in the banks and working in debt collection, but her original what she studied was hospitality. But the roles she could get at the time weren't quite right. They weren't full time, so she ended up taking a different road, and then realizing when we came back that we would like to open something together. So let's see how we go working together, and realizing that she's just as good as some very well experienced people that I've worked with, which was quite inspiring. I realised we could actually probably make our sort of dream come true and opening a restaurant when that happened. So it's pretty cool.
How does living in Noosa area impact on your work-life balance as you work and live together as well? Yeah,
I mean, for us, I think it's we love being close to the beach. I mean, that's a huge thing for us. We can take time out and we take our dog for a walk along the beach, and we just chill out like that. It's not complicated. It's just really we sort of enjoy spending time with each other, so we're not sort of fazed by the work and the coming home and sort of spending time with each other. I think we can separate that fairly well nowadays. There's always something. There's always something that might pop up, but we're pretty good at being able to separate that nowadays.
A 14-seat restaurant is not the normal restaurant model, certainly not in modern hospitality. Tell us a bit about Humble and the menu and what the offering is there.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we wanted to do was be able to create an experience for people, and by doing that, it's mostly a set menu. So we offer one menu where all your snacks come out, and they sort of have a Middle Eastern meze style sort of feel about them. And then we move into your mains and your sides, where people can choose either you have your lamb or your fish, or there's sort of an element of choice there, but they are at set prices. So you can either do your set $68 menu, or your set feed me, which is like a series of all my sort of and our sort of favourite dishes. So you get your snacks and you get your main and sides all included, and your dessert as well. And then you can obviously opt for your wine pairing in there, but there's that element of everyone can sort of have something different, and everyone can sort of have that element of, okay, I can still pick things, but they're giving me an option, but I'm still as the chef, I'm still able to give the experience that I want to give, as opposed to sort of going to your general a la carte restaurant, and that person might not be ordering what you as a chef thinks is the experience that they should have. So we're very lucky in that respect to be able to do that.
Tell us about your cooking and your food and where you're at the moment. Do you have a dish or two you can tell us about on the menu that exemplifies you at the moment?
Yeah, I think for me it's all our snacks, that go out as a series of sort of like introducing people's palates. I think people are most sort of surprised by that. We do like a small soup to start. So for some time, because it's so hot here, we've been doing chilled soups. So we did like a chilled yogurt soup with summer herbs and that through there. And you sort of wonder how people are going to react to it. And everyone's like pleasantly surprised, which is beautiful, because it's not something that people generally order as well. So sort of things like that. And I think desserts as well is something I've sort of spent a lot more time on, and I'm doing like a deep fried apple pie at the moment with a Dubliner whiskey ice cream and caramel. So this time of the year, you sort of can't go wrong with something like that. So I'm pretty into that at the moment.
You're on the Sunshine Coast, surrounded by amazing produce and producers. Are there any that stand out for you?
For me, probably our fish supplier, Soulfish, who literally is just this really wicked guy who just goes out. He's got 4 or 5 boats, and he's doing everything right. He's sustainable, no trawlers, that sort of thing, and you basically take what he's got every week. So he's a bit of a hard case, but it's nice to know that you're able to sort of get something that's sustainable and that someone's putting their love into, and it's his true passion sort of thing. Whether a lot of the other suppliers, they give you great stuff, but it's not that element of being in line, I suppose, with what we're trying to do as well, being small, being a small producer and that sort of thing, which is pretty cool. So yeah.
You've kind of gone against trend to open a really small restaurant, and during a pandemic as well. What's it been like opening a restaurant during this time, and has there been some real surprising successes for you?
I think it was always that risk element. We were sort of looking, we started looking September, sort of probably August, September last year, and you're sort of still in the midst of it, and Melbourne's going through a hell of a time there with everything, and you sort of think, there's always that element of, God, what would happen, what is going to happen, and there's still that element of it can happen, and we're just like, look, it is a way of life now and for the moment, and we just have to realise we're going to have to deal with it, and we're going to have to dig ourselves in and really make it work, like if something does happen, so. And I think there's more and more people sort of travelling to these tourist destinations at the moment because they can't go overseas and whatnot, and I think we have been a lot busier from that. I mean, even when I was working at a fairly big establishment, along Hastings Street last year, it felt busier than ever during a period of time during winter where Hastings Street's dead. Usually, and those tourist areas are dead during winter, but everyone's flocking to these destinations because there's nowhere else to go. So we feel like we're doing fairly well considering, and hopefully it only things get better for everyone else as well.
How important has the support of the local Noosa community been since you've opened the restaurant, and has there been any sort of positive feedback that you can tell us about?
Yeah, I mean, being in a small community, I suppose you notice it a lot more. And once again, we're in Sunshine Beach, so it's got, a real sort of local following that area, and everyone sort of wants to know what's going on and the new stuff that's going on and support that. And so, I think we have people that have sort of been back 20 odd times since we've opened. So, and then those people tell other people. And then so it's funny, you realise, you only sort of realise the power of word of mouth, I think, until you open your own place, because, we have all the businesses around us, telling everyone that comes into their stores or their salons or, whatever, that we're the place to go, so, and we can't thank them enough, like, how do we thank them? Like, it's pretty incredible. Yeah, we've had a lot of word of mouth and that sort of thing. So, it's inspiring.
Restaurants are renowned for small profit margins. How do you make a success out of such a small venue?
God, yeah, you've really got to be passionate about the industry to open up a small, any kind of restaurant, but especially a small establishment like we have. And, I think you've only got to keep digging your toes in, is what we've sort of learned, and keep, putting your business out there any way you can, and keep telling people your story, is the big part of it. So you can, the big thing for us is we have, we're sort of booked out on the days we expect to be booked out, like your Friday, Saturday nights, and then we have to push for everything else, Thursday's good, but your Sundays and Mondays, the Mondays are the big ones that we need to get out there, because, a lot of Noosa restaurants close on the Sunday, Monday, and it's pretty traditional. You sort of see a lot around now that people close on the Monday, and people have to have a day off when they've got a small restaurant. But we want to open on the Mondays for hospo people, because that's generally their day off. So we want to be sort of known for people to be able to come here from Brisbane if they're on holiday, and if they're in hospo, to be able to sort of experience what we've got on their days. So we open then as well. But it's always going to be a tough gig when it comes to, and having your own business is always, you're constantly understanding how it works. I mean, we've never actually done this before either, so we're like, we're talking to our accountant all the time and working out, okay, yep, that's where we're at, and we're not in a bad place, but it's always going to be the hard push.
You and Jade have opened your own restaurant for the first time, and now that it's been running for around a year, what is it that you love about what you're doing?
I think it's super satisfying for me to know that we're able to get a story out, that what we're trying to achieve and what we're trying to do. So bringing back that sort of old-fashioned hospitality and being able to touch every table and being able to probably talk to a few customers, which is something that you don't get to do. And I think it's a pretty special thing when you're able to put across your story, and Jade puts it out to all the customers every day. She's always telling our story, and that's what people want to hear, and I think being more than just a vehicle for food is something I want to be. It's like telling the story and saying, a bit more to it, having a bit more to it, having a bit more grunt to it, I think is the satisfying part of what we're achieving, I guess.
Well, Stacey, congratulations on what you've created. We've loved hearing your story today on Deep in the Weeds. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks so much, Anthony. It's been a pleasure.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.